if we had to paint the picture of somebody who might desire a home birth.
If you're going to birth at home just because your friend did or because your husband's trying to convince you, that's not necessarily the person that needs to be birthing at home. You want to desire a home birth.
I remember getting a packet and being like, oh, read this packet. Is this it? Like, This is how we're treating women who are going through birth for the very first time. I feel so uneducated. I feel so confused. Like, how safe home birth actually is.
A home birth is just as safe, if not safer, than a hospital.
Welcome back to What About Mom podcast. Today I have Nancy with me, who is a certified nurse midwife. She specializes in home birth, and I am so excited to dive into this because if you listened to my journey before, I planned a home birth for my first experience, ended up in a long labor process and a cesarean at the end of a couple days. But for my second daughter, I had a beautiful HBAC at home, actually with Nancy and her team. So it's super special for me to have her here today and talk all about how to prepare for a home birth. Or maybe you're on the fence and you're really wanting to do a home birth, you're really thinking about it, but you're just not sure yet. We're hoping to convince you it's like one of the best decisions ever, right?
I think so too. Thanks for having me. And it was a pleasure to care for you and your family. So happy to be here today, Jessica.
So amazing. Yes. Okay. First, let's just start off with what is a home birth? Like, who is a good candidate for home birth?
Yeah. Well, candidate for home birth is definitely more than 2% of the people that are, birthing at home across the U.S., right? So healthy, low-risk women, usually, when you start out that way, you stay that way. I always say there's kind of, there's black and white and there's, a little bit of gray in between. But every time we come into, through consultation, care, we're always assessing risk, right? So women that are healthy and low risk, and women that, it sounds silly, but women that want to have a home birth. Like if you're going to birth at home just because your friend did or because your husband's trying to convince you, that's not necessarily the person that needs to be birthing at home. You want to desire a home birth.
Yeah, that's so true. And 2% is such a low statistics, especially that's in U.S., I'm assuming, right? Yeah. So in other countries, home birth is more of the mainstream thing that they do.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's different? Why do you think that statistics is so flopped?
Birth is such a business here in the U.S. It's a big moneymaker. And when birth moved into the hospital and obstetricians became, primary care providers, love OBs, board certified, for surgery is a definite plus when you need it and for like higher risk women. But definitely not 98% of women need an obstetrician. Like in other countries, their standard is everybody gets a midwife and sometimes you get an OB. And here we kind of have that backwards because it is such a business. Yeah. When birth moved into the hospital and into obstetrics, it shifted a lot of things.
Yeah. And when you said too, like someone who desires a home birth, so maybe paint the picture of somebody who would desire a home birth. Like if you want certain things in your labor or your birth process or to feel a certain way during labor or birth, what would be some of those things if we had to paint the picture of somebody who might desire a home birth?
Yeah. Well, I always say to people, getting on the same page far before you're pregnant, right? So hopefully the first time that you're considering home birth isn't when you've conceived already, but for a lot of people that is the case. So when you are dating, let's talk about where you want to have your babies. Kidding, but not really, right? Being on the same page, right? And then that desire for home birth, in our practice, we do all in-home visits. We do hour-long visits in your home. So we come to you because in labor, like the first intervention is leaving your home, right? Yeah. And so people forget that, right? Like even going to a birth center, there's a time and a place for a birth center, but that's even an intervention. Like you've just left. Most people feel safe in their home. Most people feel loved in their home, and like immersing yourself in that environment when you're welcoming your baby and not having to change to go drop the dog off or take the kids to grandma's and then head to a facility that you've never been to. Right. So kind of shifting the mindset that way of like how even just walking out your door, shifts everything. So, in the home space throughout your prenatal care, coming to you, walking alongside you to really educate you, empower you throughout your labor and birth. It's very normal to like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? And so even if we sat in the space and today was your visit and you're like, I've got no questions, great. We've got 59 more minutes to talk about all the things I want you to know about, things to consider coming up. And talking about someone that just wants to be really a central part of their care. You know, it is so woman-centered. It's so family-centered. So if you want to show up to a place where you're being told what to do, or you're just, you know, I got some labs, I don't even know what they are, or I'm going for another ultrasound yet again, like that's not really the midwifery model of care, or the model of care we provide in the home setting. It's very like family-centered and informed decision-making throughout our time together.
Yeah, someone who really wants to be a part of the process, right? That wants that autonomous birth, that really wants to be a part of the decision making and learn about the birth process. I remember for my first birth, obviously, as you know too, being under your care, but for my first birth, I actually was, you know, late into the 20 weeks plus pregnant. So I went through the traditional hospital setting where I was planning to birth in a hospital, and I was going to visit. And I remember, I think we were like 26, 28 weeks pregnant. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this can't be it, right? Like, I got a packet, right? You talked about, we have 59 more minutes. Let's talk about, you know, what to expect at birth and what are your fears, and what do you, educating on, you know, the birth and how that process, the physiological normal birth process and how that unfolds. I remember getting a packet and being like, read this packet. And I'm like, literally, this is how we're treating women, especially as being a first-time mom and not really knowing what I didn't know. Yeah. And I think I just intuitively felt like, for me, like maybe you're thinking about this right now, listening in, I just wanted a different experience. And I was like, what, is this it? Like, this is how we're treating women who are going through birth for the very first time. I feel so uneducated. I feel so confused. So that's when I switched to home birth care for my first. What you do is also very different because, you know, you go to women in their homes, which not all home birth midwifery teams do that. Some people still have, you know, home birth midwife, but they still go to appointments. So when I found your care, I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. You mean I don't even have to leave my home? Yeah. And so I think that's really special and unique that you just really support women, and you go to moms' homes to be able to take a lot of that pressure off of them too. And if that's not a reason to birth at home, that's a huge perk in addition to everything else. Yeah.
And that's all intentional. You know, the number one thing I think when I worked in a home and birth center environment in Southern California, the number one time where people were missing appointments would be when they had to come into the office, right? It's like, my kids are sick, or the car broke down, or, you know, whatever. It's like there are some times where us as midwives, as your providers, we hit traffic or something comes up or whatever. But like, coming to you don't have to navigate all of those things. And if you're having a really tough pregnancy or just like a dynamic with your family, like, we really get to come into that and then fully be aware of it, right? We get to, so instead of reading a pamphlet, sitting and talking is like building a relationship and building trust and getting to know one another, which is so important. And I think, not for nothing, you know, the medical model of care, it's hard, especially when you're an insurance-driven practice. Like, they don't allow you the time. Exactly. Right? So our model is very intentional, where it's in-home. It's like you can submit to insurance, but we don't take insurance on purpose, because I don't want someone to tell me I can provide you 7 visits for 7 to 15 minutes and call that prenatal care. Right? I
mean, that's exactly how we feel, and like why our practice model is set up the way it is as well. Is like, meet mothers where they're at, 100%. You're 100% at home, which I love. We're 100% virtually, but the whole premise is like, meet mothers where they're at, so they don't have to, you know, skip appointments and delay support in their care and delay getting answers that they need. And that delay really is what makes moms feel not supported and throughout that process too. So majority of the time, it's like not bad providers in the hospital setting, good people trying to do good things, but the insurance system kind of tying, you know, them and putting them in handcuffs, making these providers spend 10 minutes with you. And that's why the appointments are as short as they are majority of the time. So we have to like choose that level of care. We have to make that choice. Totally. And you talked a little bit about insurance, and you even said you can still get it reimbursed. Will you speak? Because I know a lot of people may be considering home birth. They're fearful of like what the investment would be. Is it going to be worth it? Or maybe the husband's like, we can get it for free in the hospital. Like, why are we, right? So I'm sure you deal with this all of the time. How would you speak to this?
All the time. Yeah. I'd say husbands and partners, number one thing, they're like safety and finances, right? Sure. They want to know, like, I'm spending a lot of money for what? You know, because a majority of birth still happens in the hospital, right? Only 6% of births, 6 to 8% of births are attended by nurse midwives in and out of the hospital. Wow. 2% attended by nurse midwives at home, 3% in a birth center. So it's normal right? In our society and in the US here to think, well, this is just like we have insurance. This is just what you do. And then it gets paid for. When you see the itemization of a bill that comes from an insurance driven practice, it's wild. Or when we have to explain why we don't do an ultrasound at every visit or every other visit. I'm not trying to get $1,000 reimbursement from your insurance company. It's not really what's best for you, right? So we kind of talk about like what goes into that care. But we do have a third-party biller who's amazing. Tara, little shout out. Don't know why you do what you do, but I love you, girl. But she will work with families to, give them best case, worst case of reimbursement. And because we are certified nurse midwives, that reimbursement tends to be pretty good if you have a plan that covers maternity, without a high deductible. We still submit to insurance for labs and ultrasounds and things like that. But when we get to it in the consult where it's just like, what type of care do you want? Do you want care where you can pay your copay, you can rush in and out of an office for 7 to 10 minutes and sit in a waiting room for 45 minutes and have one postpartum visit where hormonal birth control is the topic and then you leave? Like, if that's what you want and it's like that's what gets covered, there's a time and a place for that. But that's just, we want care to be different. And on the flip side, being a business owner and employing amazing women, I want them to be compensated generously for the work that they do and the time and space that they provide for our families as well.
Yeah, it all comes back to like that empowerment and an educated choice, right? I think like women don't know what they don't know, right? If only 2% of women are birthing at home, some women don't even know it's an option for them or don't even know it's a choice for them, or like it feels so not normal that I'll just go the normal route. But actually, like, we've been birthing at home for many, many years.
Way longer than we've been birthing in a hospital.
Right. And so it's like coming back and circling back to and educating on safety. So I'd love to dive into that piece too. If people are considering home birth or you're, planning for a home birth, tell us a little bit more about like how safe home birth actually is, because I think it's a big myth in the home birth world. And then also, obviously, you're a certified nurse midwife. So that's a little bit different as well for someone who chooses not that particular certification.
And when we're looking at statistics and we're looking at evidence, because there's that piece of it, but then there's also intuition, right? And it's like a mom's intuition and mom being the center of choices in care is never going to be wrong. So I want to just, preface with that. But evidence says for a low-risk healthy woman, a home birth is just as safe, if not safer, than a hospital. Because again, that leaving your home is the first intervention, getting in your car, going to a place you're not familiar with, even continuous monitoring of low-risk healthy women is not evidence-based. And so there's a lot of things, we call it the cascade of intervention, that you get into. And then on the flip side, you hear, well, thank goodness I was there because, but nobody talked about the 3-day Pitocin induction that you had prior to your baby crashing, right? It's sort of like what caused what, right? And so, from a safety standpoint, the evidence really says that it is safer. But if 98% of people are birthing in a hospital, are they really doing the research on what is the safety of home birth? And I'm not talking about if you have uncontrolled diabetes or high blood pressure, or we're having triplets. Like, we're not even having this conversation. I'm going to be like, candidate. Here is a great hospital provider for you. But I'm talking about healthy, low-risk women that desire home birth. And then in addition to that, statistically, that evidence supports trained midwives. And not all midwives are created equal, just like not all bees are created equal. Like, you're going to have a mix regardless of where you go, right? So really diving into interviewing people. Like I always say, like, interview other people. I have people in consults all the time. Like, you're telling me to talk to somebody else? Absolutely. Like, don't choose a care provider just because your friend did or your neighbor did or you read this cute story on Instagram. Like, choose them for who you feel safe with. And like, you've asked the tough questions too, right?
Yeah, feeling safe with this provider is huge, especially for the amount of time and energy and attention that they're going to care for you in prenatal and, of course, labor and into postpartum as well. And even into what you said of like, oh, what caused what, right? So we tend to hear that a lot. Oh, thank God I was at the hospital because my baby got stuck. Thank God I was at the hospital because I started bleeding. Right. But midwives carry, certified nurse midwives carry all of the same medications and Like talk to me a little bit more about like all the things that you carry. It's basically like you're bringing the hospital, but just to the home, right?
Right. I always say, so we do, well, from the beginning of care, right? Even just in that consultation, we speak to that. We talk about things throughout care. But at 37 weeks, we do a birth conference, and we call it your birth hopes and dreams, because it's not a plan, because plans go out the window, as we know. But birth hopes and dreams, like, how do you envision this birth? Like, down to everything, like, right? It's like, what's the lighting like? Are you in the water? Are you not? Are your kids there? Like, who's around? How involved do you want to be in catching the baby? Because, like, if I come to your birth and I just assume I'm going to be a hands-off midwife sitting in the corner, and you really want hands-on, like, I don't want to touch my baby, that's what you're here for, you're going to be really disappointed.
Right.
Because, like, you're just going to have that expectation or that perception that I'm not going to carry out. And so we've really individualized our care, speak to every family about, like, how they, like, envision their birth. With obviously the conversation of, like, we don't get to control that. I always tell people, like, I'm just a midwife and you're just the mom and your baby's just your baby. We're not God. We don't get to decide, right? But we do get to hold that space and really try to honor what it is you want. And then in addition to that, we talk about the what ifs, you know, because I think one of the biggest misperceptions is, oh, I transferred because of hemorrhage, like too much blood or a shoulder or whatever. No, like, midwives are trained to handle those things. It's if those things are not improving or, you know, extra help is needed, you're not able to, like, you know, stabilize and all that stuff, that we call. The number one reason for transfer, you know, statistically across the U.S. is first-time moms who are exhausted. So I always tell moms, you might be exhausted, but if your body's had a baby before, either in the hospital, if you've birthed a baby vaginally, even if you had an epidural before, forceps, vacuum, anything, like, your body's done it, right? Even with cesarean, if your body has labored at any, like, at all, that is still a great benefit, right? And so it's not, the reasons for transfer are not what people might think they are, right? We're trained to handle those things. Now that can, depending on the type of midwife you have at your birth or even the state you're in, right? Because, you know, rules and regulations for certain types of midwives vary depending on where you are state to state. So I think it's really great we try to, from the minute of consultation, talk about all of that stuff. And it's really great questions for, you know, families that want to get into care. Ask the tough questions. If you ask me how many babies I caught, what if all those babies came flying out? You know, that doesn't really tell you anything about my skill or the safety measures that we have in place, right? But if you say to me, how would you handle this if this happened? That's just a whole different conversation.
Asking more specific questions, or especially those fears that you might have, right? What are those very specific fears? And I even remember, like, for my first birth going to, 42 plus, and I was like, okay, one of my fears is that I'm not going to go into labor naturally. One of my fears is that I'm not going to progress, because that's what happened for my first. But the beautiful thing about, like, the relationship with you and your team is that we had those conversations prior and during my pregnancy, that those fears just started to dwindle, and then they weren't really fears anymore, because it was like, we would handle it this way and we would do this. And also, you have the option for cervical checks if you don't want them. And I was like, wow, I do. And so even my first home birth experience, I was getting so many checks to see how dilated I was, learning the evidence and the research and, behind that it doesn't always tell us the perfect picture, that I actually had a choice in that. I was like, yeah, that was one of those things that triggered me of feeling like, oh, my body's not progressing fast enough. So I remember the solution being like, well, we just don't have to do checks if you don't want to. And if you decide during the labor process you want to, we can. And so we went the whole labor experience, not one cervical check, to see how dilated I was. And that really shifted that belief system for me, and like for women at home, of whatever those fears are that you have coming up in the birth process, or prior to the birth process, start to have those conversations then, so that you can talk about what that particular provider would do.
Because that fear is not going to go away, right? And that fear doesn't mean, like, sometimes I'll have people come to me and be like, well, I'm fearful of bleeding, right? I'm fearful of having too much blood loss after birth. Okay, where does that stem from? Did this happen with your mom? Did this happen to your friend? Did you read it on a Facebook group? Usually there's something, right? And even if there's not, what I tell people is you're going to have to overcome that fear regardless if you birth in a hospital, a birth center, or at home, or alone in the woods. Like,
So true.
you're going to have to navigate that. And you either repress that and you don't get to the root of that, which is just, we don't know what's going to come up in labor.
Right.
That could go a lot of ways. Or you work through it with someone. And when you have the time and space and energy to sit on someone's couch, and if 3-hour-long visits are just talking about postpartum hemorrhage or too much blood loss after my baby is out, then so be it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that's what that mom needed. That's what that mom needed to feel that safe in her her nervous system.
Yeah.
Let's talk about safety with husbands too, of course. Like my husband, super analytical, black and white type guy. So of course, at first he was like, wait, what? What are we doing? Like, is this normal? Right. And I wish he was here because I should actually interview him. That would be super fun to hear his experience as a dad going through both experiences. I know for my husband, like for the first one being, transfer and ended up being a C-section and all the beeping in the hospital, that gave him so much anxiety watching me at the hospital with hooked up to all the monitors and then everything that happened. Going into the, HVAC for our second baby, of course, there were some of those fears, but of course, speaking to the husband's fears during these appointments, because you have the time and space to be able to do it is so important for the mom that's about to birth as well. And at least it was for me. Yeah.
And too, like he's part of it. He's not the one having the baby, right? He's not the one we have to chart on or do assessments on or whatever, but taking that into, because like his energy is also present in the room and like feeding off of each other's energy. And so a lot of times once I talk about, safety and finances and you can actually see like the physical release of like, okay, like they start breathing again in the consult. It really helps because like someone they love is having someone else they love. And they're really just like, they don't get to birth the baby, right? So if we are having a conversation, I'll never have a conversation. Well, I'll have the conversation, but I'll never convince any woman. Like if the woman is going, I don't want to birth at home, and the husband's like, oh, yes, we do. That's a whole different story, right? But if the mom is like, this is where I really want to desire to birth, but he's not quite on board, let's talk about that. Like, why is that? Because usually it's some like deep-seated, it's trauma or something you read or a misconception. And they feel better after we've had a conversation. And there's a lot of times where it is a two-way street when you're interviewing someone. And so I just always urge people, like, even if two people are like, yeah, we'd probably never home birth. Like if you interview midwives or birth centers or whatever, you don't know what you're saying no to.
So true.
You really don't, right? And like things might come up in conversation that you get to then bring into the provider that you go to. There's been times I've talked with people and I'm like, if you can't overcome that or you don't want to be an active participant, like, 10% of babies are going to need some sort of resuscitation wherever they're born, right? 1% need massive resuscitation. Like in a healthy, low-risk woman, that's not very common at home when we're not intervening and we're not messing with birth. But if somebody's sitting there going, I would not be okay if my baby was right here and you were doing all the things, like I need you to like take them away, do whatever. It might not be the best place to birth at home. Yeah. And we have those conversations, but normally when you have those conversations ahead of time, who we are, what do we do, how are we trained, what do we carry? To me, it's more anxiety inducing if I'm rolling into a hospital and they just say, well, if that happens, just trust us.
Right.
Trust you with what?
Might not even have the same provider.
Like I might not have the same provider.
Yeah.
I've seen none of these nurses before.
Exactly.
You're going to push a button on the wall. I've worked in all the places, so I'm not, I'm not.
And I birthed in both places.
Fashion,
so, yeah, totally.
But I'm just saying it's just different. You're not, a lot of times you're not having those conversations ahead of time. It's like this, like we just are taught in our society, like trust this and this is where safe, whatever, but that's not necessarily the case. And so having those conversations ahead of time, I don't want you to hear the word Pitocin, for instance, which is a medication to help control bleeding. I don't want you to hear that for the first time at your birth. Right. I want you to hear that ahead of time of like, we have this if we need it, but that's like way down the line. We have some other things. And, then we're having, we're able to act and with that sense of trust and security versus like, what do you mean? What are you doing? What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even from like the experience that we had with my husband now, he's like, why would anyone birth not at home? Right. And of course you still have to make your own choice for every pregnancy and every birth and everything's are going to be different. But now having that experience afterwards where I was just able to birth my baby and crawl in my bed.
Yeah.
And my son was there at the house and he woke up early, and then it was just like so normal. And my son was even at the birth as well. Talk to me about kids and at the birth as well.
Kids at birth.
Yeah. Some people are like so anxious about it, but I feel like also if we create this fear around birth for children, like they can't handle it, versus just educating kids that this is a totally physiologically normal process. Yeah. How do you walk through, with your clients too? Like, should we have the kids there? Should we not have the kids there? Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, a lot of them, again, going back to the intentionality of the home setting, there'll be times where people are like, oh, my kids will be away at this time. So the appointment, like, no, if it's okay with you, like, let's do the appointment when your kids are here.
Yeah.
Let's involve them. And, getting to know them where like they're very familiar with us. Half the time I joke the kids think we're coming to your birth and we're just like there to play trains or cards or whatever. And that happens sometimes actually. But I think them getting comfortable. But the way that you view birth and the way that you expose birth to them is how they're going to view it until they know otherwise.
Right.
So our society has taught us to fear birth and to fear pain and to numb pain and all of these things. And if we really can shift that from, in-home care, watching our siblings be born, watching our sister give birth, like that, back to that communal family, centered birth, it's really going to shape like future generations of like, oh, you can birth at home if you're, low risk and healthy. Because if you choose to birth at home, and I tell this to all of our families, you always have the option to go somewhere else. Clinically, there could be nothing on your chart. It could be you're doing great, your baby's doing great, and you're just like, you know what, like, I just want to go. You have every right to do that.
Yeah.
But if you start in the hospital, you can only, like
you can only go so far.
You can go from unmedicated to medicated to surgery, right?
Right.
Home birth, like you've just given yourself a few more options. And if at any time somebody wants to transfer, they can. It doesn't happen a lot, but
that's such a great point. Like being able to start at home, it gives you so many more options. Because you can always go to the hospital if you want to go to the hospital. And that's not a failure. If you decide that that's not for you in the moment, or if the midwife says, hey, you know what, you were low risk prior and now I'm, monitoring and I'm seeing some things that we're going to transfer now. And so you always have the option to go that direction. But starting in the hospital, it's not like you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it at home unless baby comes so fast which happens all the time
you
too.
can sign out IMA and you can go free birth. I wouldn't recommend it. But, and I want to speak to that too, like that failed home birth. I hate that term, right? Because either a woman chose to change the place where she wants to birth because that's what she chose, and we should come alongside her and support that and honor that. Or there's a reason a mom or baby needs to go to a hospital. Like that's what they're there for.
That's not a
like
failure.
Higher level of care is not a failure. Because if you look at it, like I said, I've worked in labor and delivery in the hospital too. You don't go from, hey, room 7 isn't doing an epidural and now they're having anesthesia come by at 5.
Right.
That's not a failed
natural birth,
unmedicated birth.
Right.
That you don't code it as such.
Right.
Or like you go from the labor unit and then you go back to the OR. You don't say that's a failed L&D birth. Like
so true.
It's just interesting the stigma that's put on like the home birth, like just either, like I said, a mom changing her mind or a mom and baby needing extra attention.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what they're really there for.
I feel like that was a term maybe you slung around with me. Oh, failed home birth for the first attempt for a first-time mom. It's like, wait a second, we chose safely to transfer to the hospital, but so did the mom who was always going to birth at the hospital. She chose to safely go to the hospital. So in both instances, like I agree with you completely. It resonates so much with me, of course, too. But like this term failed home birth, I think we just completely should throw it out because it attaches so much stigma and judgment to the birth experience when really two moms, no matter where they started, they just chose to safely transfer to the hospital, and it's not a failure either way. So I love that you spoke about that.
That's why talking about transfer rates sometimes is really hard because you get a true picture, right?
Right.
If we, last year we cared for 115 families, and out of those, if somebody chose, this actually did happen. First time mom was in labor, was found to be breech. She's like, I trust you. I trust your team, but I don't want to have a breech baby at home.
Right.
And so that changed your plan. And we totally honored that.
Yeah.
But if you look at a statistic, they had a transfer. Well, yeah, because we honored what the mom and dad wanted when they found out new information about how their baby was presenting.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, what is the percentage of actual emergency transfers in home birth? Very low, right? Like very low. Extremely low. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because just to speak on that, I mean, we had 2 transfers of care in labor last year for the one I shared, and then one who was found to be preeclamptic but laboring. So preeclampsia is high blood pressure and some other things going on. You should be in the hospital. And then 3 other people transferred prior to labor admission. We had no admissions for no transfers for exhaustion, no transfers for whatever. Extremely proud of that. But also, it needs to paint a good picture of what is it. Because if say a transfer rate's 10%, well, what if all those moms chose to go get an epidural? We should honor that.
Totally.
It doesn't mean it's a failure. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that maybe that space was held in honoring. So digging into those, statistics too, when interviews and things like that come up can be really helpful for people to get a full picture of what it is they're looking for.
Really decrease a lot of stigma around home birth in general and just create more safety and letting moms choose and have an active participant in their home during this birth experience and during this labor process is so important too. Okay, so I'm curious, what has been the best thing about being a home birth midwife for you from your perspective?
Oh my gosh. So I love being able to, I actually grew emergence midwifery back in 2018 in Southern California when I was pregnant with my daughter. And it was just beautiful to have been working in all the settings. Like I've done hospital, I've done in-hospital birth center, home birth center. I've birthed all my kids out of the hospital with midwives. And, that statistic of 2% of nurse midwives working in the home really just had always rocked me. From like graduate school, it was just like you can be so you can be high touch and low tech, and like you can take the knowledge base and the education that you have, and then you can bring it into a healthy low risk setting and be able to expand the scope of what we can provide in the home as well. Because I think a lot of times, depending on where you live, some of the restrictions and the rule, it's not better for moms and babies. It's really not. And so I'm thankful for that scope and not having that. But being able to come into the home space, educate and empower families, being a business owner and having control over what that looks like, really having a good work-life balance for the people that work with me, creating a team, because it's not just about having a care provider. It's also like outside of that, I always joke with people, if we don't do it, our highlight has someone who does. So pelvic floor therapy, chiropractors, acupuncture, childbirth education, doulas, it's so important. And I think that's another thing too that's been really fun for me is creating this incredible community of like-minded providers of care in a multi-team approach. Has been really amazing, because even like if it's a first-time mom, they don't know what they don't know, right? But if it's a fourth-time mom and she's like, I've never been told to go to pelvic floor therapy, like what? And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. And so that's been really cool. But then on the flip side of, from a business standpoint, just being able to take other nurse midwives and bring them into the home setting has been so fun. This past year has been filled with a lot of like change and transition, but it's been, deeply blessed, and being able to have women who weren't always, other nurse midwives who weren't always, really like honored with how they wanted to practice or who they were in other settings, like being able to bring them into a space where they can truly be who they are. And it's been really fun to watch.
I just love hearing that. And you're so good at what you do. And you were perfectly designed for this role in this business and this company too, that you have, merged. I love the term.
Fitting, right?
So fitting, right? But I totally could not resonate more than that too. Just being a mom and a woman business owner, being able to provide careers and jobs for others that kind of shakes up the way that the traditional setting does it, and to be able to serve and support women in the ways that we believe is most important, and, very family-centered, care-centered is so incredibly important. Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to end with one last question. What did we not talk about today when moms are thinking about our pregnancy, in their pregnancy phases? I'm wanting to prepare for a home birth, or I'm thinking about a home birth. Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything we didn't cover that you want to share, or a myth that you want to bust?
Ooh. You don't have to go to the hospital and have a birth to see how it went to then have a home birth.
Okay.
You know?
Because not many first-time moms are doing home
Yeah.
births. Yeah.
A lot of times we'll hear that. Like, I wanted to try the hospital first. I wanted to see how it went and see that I could do it. You're doing a completely different thing, right?
So true. And it's not even a comparison.
It's not even a comparison. Apples to oranges, right? And so I think just knowing, like, having those conversations, doing those interviews, meeting with people, immersing yourself in, like, birth and birth stories. Like we share a lot of birth stories either through videos or photos or whatever from the family's perspective on our Instagram. And I think can be really empowering, because if you only see birth in one way, that's all you know. So if you don't know, and it doesn't have to be picture perfect and beautiful, it can be, you know, whatever it is, but the more you immerse yourself in that. So I think, just that myth that it's like, this is how you have to do it. Or just really, I love to encourage and empower people to do what feels right for the two of you. Like, your mom doesn't have to agree. Your neighbor doesn't have to agree. Aunt Sue doesn't need to know what you're doing about
Sometimes
anything.
that's so hard too. Like really blocking out the noise of family members and neighbors and all of the things.
Totally. Because like, this is your birth experience, and they'll get to do theirs, or they got to do theirs, and they don't get to rewrite yours. You alone get to do that.
Okay, one more bonus question, because I feel like we are like rolling on this too. What if a mom is planning a home birth, and she's probably here listening to this episode, at least this far, and because she's planning a home birth, and she doesn't have a supportive family member, friend, what do you advise them? Because this can really mess with their head mentally.
It can. So number of things. I always tell people, like, just reassuring, if you and your husband or partner are on the same page, then like, you're already winning. Yeah. Right. There's a lot of women, you know, that I've seen not get the care that they desired because someone very close to them didn't support it. Yeah. And that's really hard. That's probably the hardest thing. If it's an extended family member, even if it's your moms, we love you, dads, we love you, grandmas, grandpas, but it's like not your space, right? And so I always tell people, it's not your job to educate or empower people or change anybody's mind really on your choices. But if you wanted to, here's some things you can open up in conversation, or I invite them to prenatal visits. I've had, if they're, and even if they're not local, like, get them on FaceTime, get them on Zoom. Like, one of my favorite things to do is dispel myths of people who are just like, I have some questions for you. And then they like roll out the thing, and you're like, ooh, okay, I'm going to bump back some visits today, because I'm just going to stay there and answer them all, you know? Because again, not really in their time or place to do that. But we also, when we're talking about that, like that birth conference, anybody who's going to be at your birth, we want to be there, because we don't want that energy coming into the room. Like, if your mom's not supportive and you're inviting her to your birth, we're going to have to unpack a whole bunch of stuff about that. Maybe she's not before birth. Yeah. Maybe she's not the best one to have in the space. But if you really want her in the space, let's work on that, because we're not going to bring that negative energy into that. We're not going to have that, like, you laboring and being like, oh, this is what she's really thinking or feeling. And when everybody in the room has a sense of peace about the choices that are being made, and it just feels different. Right.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so important. I mean, I know I went through that myself too. And one of my solutions was not telling people when I went into labor. Yeah.
Or you could do that. We have people do that.
Right. And I was just like, surprised we had a baby. Yeah. And I think that was so peaceful for me, because my previous experience of having a really long labor and everyone being updated every few hours. And I felt like I was on this clock, and I was like, I'm just going to have my baby, and I'll let you know when the baby arrives. So it was so important for me too. But I love how you talked about the protection of the space and the environment and the energy that's being brought into that room, of like really thinking about, who do you want to be in that room? Not who wants to be in that room, but like, who do you want to be in that room?
Who's going to pour into you as a laboring mother, and not who's going to be in that room updating the rest of your extended family. Exactly. No. Who's going to be in that room to be like, I've got your kids, I've got your dog, I'm going to make you this nourishing postpartum meal, your laundry's already started, and I've ordered your groceries. Like, that's that person.
Have that person in your room.
Have that person. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's really important. And there's times too where it's like, we have people like not tell anyone, but If they're going to be there, it's a little bit of a different conversation.
absolutely.
But my fear, I'm always like, do not notify friends, family on Facebook that you're in labor. Just don't, you know, and even turning your phone off towards the end of your pregnancy. Let everyone know, hi, I'm alive and well, but I'm taking this time and space to, you know, disconnect. Like we just live in a culture that doesn't do that. And so
true.
allowing for that, and never, ever share your due date.
I'm so glad you said that. I was like, if she doesn't say it, I'm definitely
Yeah.
saying that. Like, do not tell anyone your due date. Oh,
Never.
sometime in the middle of the month.
Yes.
Sometimes towards
Sometime
the
in
end.
the fall.
Yeah, sometime in the fall.
You could say sometime in the summer if you live in
Sure.
Arizona, because that could literally be any month.
So true.
Because it's always hot here.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
due dates.
Never
like,
share
get
due
me up
dates.
in arms too. Yeah,
No.
I think never share due dates.
4% of babies are born on that date. So statistically.
And most are born after.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
41 and 3, 41 and 5 is the most common thing we see, right? So even dispelling that, you know, in the midwifery model and especially in the home setting, it's really hard, I think, for extended family to be like, do they know it was your due date the other
Yes.
week? No,
Yeah.
no, we don't. We've been providing you care for 40 weeks and we just must have slipped our minds.
Literally
yes, we know.
I had someone actually ask me, because for my daughter, my HBAC, I delivered at 41 plus 4. And no intervention, no nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's when she came. That was like her timeline. And when I was telling, I can't remember if it was a friend or a stranger, to be honest with you, I don't really remember.
Yeah.
But they said, I can't believe they let you go that
Let
late.
you.
Let me. And I was like, I can't believe that my baby decided its own due date.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that, of course, like there can be
Yeah.
a time and place for
Time
an
and place for
induction.
induction, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like the perceived belief system
Yeah.
that, you know, we believe in babies enough to be able to conceive and to create life and to start life in that way. But we don't trust in babies to be born on their own desired timeline and date too. So, okay, all of the goods for all of the moms that are preparing for home birth. Thank you so much, Nancy,
so
for
welcome.
being here. This
Yeah.
was incredible. Send this to your husband, to your girlfriend, to your mom if you need to. This is here to be a resource for you. And I'm just so grateful that we had you here today.
Grateful for you. Thank you.
Yes.